there, I'm recording this now so that students who are not here, I will be sending them this important presentation, and then also these announcements that I have. So important to listen. There is an assignment that I had set up, and somebody, I can't remember who it was, I didn't see, asked about the TED Talk. And I have made a decision. I'd like to explain why in a moment. I am going to drop that. You're not going to have to do it. And what I'm going to do, it's worth 5%. I'm going to just redistribute that 5% over all the assignments. So you won't lose any percentage value from not doing it at all, but it's going to be within the other assignments that have been done and you have yet to finish. So we're not going to do the TED Talk, okay? And I'll come to that in a few moments as to why. Yeah. Speech number 3, your persuasive speech. Now that is due, and that is due next week, next Friday on April 2. If you look at the syllabus, we're right on time with everything. That will be due, I'm just double checking here. Oh, excuse me, I'm not looking at the right section here. Yeah, that's due on April 2. So your next speech is due April 2. That's next week, okay? Just so that you're aware of that. And that's next Friday, a week today. Now, we will not be meeting. However, I am going to do a recording that gives you instructions about the final exam, etc., and just expectations. The final exam is 2 weeks today on April 9. That will be our last class. We don't meet, but I'm going to give you a recording. You must watch it and let me know you watch it. It will give you all the instructions. So I'll be sending that recording. It's a YouTube. If you can't get onto YouTube, just let me know, and you and I can talk about it as far as emails back and forth. So let me explain. You don't have to worry about the TED Talk assignment. You don't lose any percentages in that process. The persuasive speech is due 1 week today as it is scheduled. I am going to be sending you next week a recording explaining preparation for the final exam. The final exam is 2 weeks today, right during this time. And I will give you full explanation, so you must watch my recording. I will send you the link, etc. It won't be a long, but it'll take a half an hour to 45 minutes likely, just to make sure, maybe not quite that long. To make sure you have complete understanding, you must let me know that you've watched it. You must confirm that you have watched it. That's important, so that I know that you're ready for the final exam. Okay, so I'm saying it over and over again. You will not be doing the TED Talk, and I'm glad somebody, I'm not sure who it was that asked that question about that. You will not lose percentages. That's going to be redistributed, so you will not lose value from not doing that. You will have the persuasive speech in to me a week today, and I'm going to have a recording. I had thought about meeting with you on Friday of next week for 1 hour, but I thought I would do a recording of it. And if you have questions, all you have to do is email me, and I'll make sure to clarify any answers. 2 weeks today is your final exam for the course. And then you're finished. So we are coming now towards the close of this course. So off the top right now, before I begin to the announcement that I do want to make, are there any questions to what I've just said?
Hi, Congo.
Yes.
Any preparation for us for the final exam?
Okay. I will on that recording that I'm going to do, I'll give you all preparation. But again, I have shared this before, so let me share this part with you again to everybody. Thank you, Tom, for that question. The final exam, you are to watch. You're going to be all receiving a speech individually. I'm going to be sending, because you're all going to be sitting at your computer, and I'll send it earlier than 1 o'clock next Friday. And you will all, not all, but I'll have different speeches that I'm going to use as a final exam. Okay, so not all of you are going to have the same exam. I mean, the same speech. And you are to watch the speech. You can watch it more than once. It'll be, I'll send you the link. It's on YouTube, and then you can watch it. And you can watch it more than once. Then you must write a 1,000 to 1,200 word critique essay. It's not a formal essay, it's an exam essay. So, okay, so my interest is your ability to critique, as I've been critiquing your speeches, but now you have to do it with written explanation why you believe the different parts of the speech were done well or done okay or done poorly. You have to defend yourself. So that will be the exam. You watch it. You can watch it more than once. You know that evaluation form I gave you? You certainly can use that as far as circling the numbers. And then what you can do is write the essay off of that. You don't send me that evaluation page. I'm after the essay only from you. That will be 2 weeks today. I will be sending all of you a link with just as much clarification as I possibly can bring to your preparation for the exam, which is 2 weeks today. Okay. So good question. Any more questions before I go on to this announcement I need to make?
So for the exam, how long would be during the exam?
Excellent question, Tom. Tom, this class runs technically from 1 o'clock till 3:30, or technically 4 o'clock, but you're supposed to get 10-minute breaks. So if you say, because of English, hey, that's my second language or third language, you need more time, all you have to do is let me know. And here's how you'll let me know. I will be sending you each individually an email with a link to the speech you're to watch. When you get it, you check to make sure the link works. You do kick on it to make sure it comes up. Stop it, write me back and say, I got the link and it works. As you're doing it, if you simply need more time, just inform me. Don't wait to see if I answer back. Just assume it's okay. For instance, let's say you need an extra hour, hour and a half. Let's just say you need to go all the way to 5:30. I mean, I'm talking about BC time. So we start at 1 o'clock. And let's say you need to go to 5 or 5:30. That's okay. Okay. So don't feel time pressure. I want you to watch the speech, watch it a couple of times, evaluate it, then write an essay of 1,000 to 1,200 words. And then do it on Word so that I can open it with no problems. I watch it. I give you a grade. I do not let you know the grade back again as a normal final exam. You will find out everything when you get the final grade for the course, which I'll be putting on, during exam week, depending on exactly when I should do that. So I'll try to get to it as quickly as I can, but I can't promise. And I'll explain something else to you. First of all, before I do say anything, that was a good question, Tom. Any more questions?
So are you gonna give us the link of and guidance of the final by email or on the Moodle?
Okay, no. I will, that's a good question. I am going to, here's what I'm going to be doing. First of all, I'm going to be sending next week a link with my talk, just a short talk about the final exam. Then on exam day, I'm going to send, Tiana, I will send to everybody here, I'm going to send you each individually an email coming from my home here. Because I'll be here at this computer. I mean, I may not be sitting at the computer the whole time, but I'll be at my home during that day, afternoon, in 2 weeks' time. I will send you an email, and on the email, I'm going to give you the instructions again. You're going to get all the instructions plus the link to the speech. And if you have any questions, you can send me back a question of clarification. I will give you all the instructions again about doing the exam on exam day, but I want to prepare you, so I'm telling you about it now. Then I'm sending you this little half an hour or so recording talking about the final exam, trying to make sure you're prepared. I'm going to try my best to make sure you're prepared. Then on the day of the exam, I will send you an email with the link, and I'll give you the instructions again, just print it out for you in regard to what you do. When you finish the exam, when you've written up the exam, written up your answer, your evaluation, your critique, you send it back to the email address that you will have received my information from, which is my home, where I'm sitting at right now. So just send it to this email address here. Okay, so did I answer your question, Tiana?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay. Okay, if not, now I want to talk about something on a personal level, and then I want to go to my last lecture, which is on the issue of words, which usually I do, language or words, which I usually do earlier in the semester. And I pushed it back because something else I felt needed to be addressed first. Then actually, I didn't bring up that evaluation form, but I thought I would, at least if I can find it real quickly, I'll find it, put it up. I wanted to kind of just give you a sense of the areas that, as a class, that I observations of your last speech. You've each gotten your personal observation. So I'll hope to do that, but I'll have to find that evaluation form and bring it up. I forgot to put it up on my computer here. So I'll try to make sure I get that ready for you and have that up and ready to go. So just a second here. Now, something very personal that I wanted to share with you, and that's one reason why I may cut today's class a bit short. Let me explain. Back in January, my wife went, of course, for her annual checkup, and her doctor sent her for tests, etc. And she got a phone call from our hospital, which said, we have detected a spot in your body, and we suspect it is cancer. And so she's gone through testing and the whole process. It's a few tests here and there. And finally, I took her to the hospital where she went in for the initial response, and it was, in fact, she has cancer. And they found it early, which was a really good blessing to find it early. And they said that she would need to have an operation. Last Friday, in fact, right now, literally 1 week ago at 1:30, they did the operation on her. And in this particular situation, the cancer was in an isolated location. It was like, and it wasn't large, it was incredible that they found it. It was that tiny, but serious enough that they did not want to waste time. She had the operation, and they cut around much large, like the spot was really, small, but then they cut wide around it to try to make sure they took all of the cancer out. So, and then they, of course, sewed her up, and I was allowed to bring her home. She was obviously dopey and etc. That later that night, and she basically went to bed and she slept right through the whole night and was okay as far as walking around a little bit the next day in the house a little bit, and then she slept a good part of that day and that next night. On the Sunday, she started to be more alert and with it, and so it's been a very stressful time, and perhaps there have been times when I don't know that you would have noticed anything, but maybe you did. It would have been the stress of not knowing, and that's very stressful. She received a phone call on Wednesday. But the fact is, right about now, about 2 days ago, and it was from the doctor who did the operation. And she said they had taken what they cut out and they tested it, all different parts of it. And they said where it was further away from the spot, they didn't find detection of cancer, which means it hadn't spread as far as they could tell. However, on April 6th is when we get our final conclusions from the medical people on April 6th. So that's in about, a week or so here. I'm just kind of looking, just over a week, I guess, when we will find out the official decision or conclusion. What the doctor did say is that she will be having some radiation, which is not as serious as like having chemotherapy. Just she will not have chemotherapy, but just radiation. And it's the doctors believe it's more for the purpose of ensuring, in case they miss something, that the radiation will capture what they might have missed. They don't think they did, but it's kind of a conservative approach. So the bad news is that she has cancer. The good news is it looks like they took care of the cancer, but we have some waiting to do. And so it's good news amongst something that's not really good news. So I don't know about you, but when you hear the word cancer, it's a frightening thought. So she is downstairs right now, just on the couch resting. She's able. I've been able to take her when we have a dog. I took the dog for a walk in the morning and again in the evening, and she's been able to come with me for the last 2 days, 3 days, and then she's very tired after. But they say walking is a very good thing to be doing. So it's not a long walk; it's a short walk. So I only share that with you. If you pray, I'd appreciate that. Secondly, just so you're informed that I've been a little bit off. Maybe you haven't noticed it. And also, I might cut today's class short because I just want to make sure everything is okay with her, etc. So I just am sharing that with you so that you're aware of kind of what's going on in my life and just aware, if for no other reason, just what's going on. So I thank you that you're at least sensitive and understanding. These things happen to any one of us, and it's never a fun sort of experience. So I wanted to share that with you, just so you know that I've got something else on my mind these days. And as you know, I think I've shared with you, we've been married 50 years this last December. And so anyways, I just share that with you so you're aware. I do want to shift gears, and I want to, I'm just going to check one thing here. I just checking to see if anybody else joined. Nope. Class. I want to talk about the issue of language. I usually talk about this earlier in the semester, as I mentioned, but I shifted the schedule a little bit, and now I'm going to deal with it. You may remember back early in the semester, I talked about three important parts that make a message. It's like a circle, and I said that roughly 50% of the total message comes from our body language, and that 40%, which is a significant part, comes from our tone of voice, our vocals, our pitch, our vocal variety, the speed in which we speak, those sort of factors and other factors that I evaluated you on in the last speech and will be in the next speech. And then I talked about that 10%, the issue of words. And you may or may not remember, I tried to help you understand that that the words make up about 10% of a total message. They're the most important part. Remember, I used the diamond ring. There's the circle. There's the setting. The ring's got it's a circular. It's got a setting, and then it's got the diamond, and the diamond sits out like this at the front part, and that's what people look at, is the diamond. Well, when people are listening, they are listening to your words. Those are the diamond of your speech, but yet your body language and your nonverbals all have impact. And if you're not working on your verbals, it can actually limit the power of the words that you use. And so you need to think about this issue. So I'm coming back to that one part. I really wanted to do it earlier, but I put something else in and shifted things around a little bit. So language, words, absolutely the critical part in regard to your speech. And so let me walk through this. By the way, you have this PowerPoint. I sent you all my PowerPoints. If for some reason you can't find the PowerPoints I sent you, you can send and ask for them, and I'll send them to you again. So we're talking about words, about the issue of that formation of sound, words that have meaning to it. Language is the tool used to communicate meaning. And we use different forms. We can use sign language, we can use verbal language, but the actual words, for instance, when my daughter and son-in-law had their children, at the very beginning, when you're trying to get your children, you may not know this, but you're trying to get your children I'm having trouble with my thing here. I'm just going to move my seat up. Yeah, that's a little better. When you are needing to communicate, a child coming into this world doesn't have actual words that they use yet, that those are going to be formed. And so what my daughter and son-in-law began to do is to teach their children simple sign language. Like, I remember this meant more. Like if they wanted a little more food, if they did this, it meant more. And they taught them other words, simple sign language words. And then, of course, over time, that got replaced by the children being in an environment where verbal words were used. And in their brain, they began to store, and remember we talked about this, they began to store, we'll come back to that in a moment, what we talked about before, because I got a quick review here. And your brain is an incredible computer. It has the capacity to store, and it starts storing early, and they begin to sound out words and begin to use the simplest of words to communicate. And then as we grow, our vocabularies expand in our mind, and we're able to listen to another person using many words at one time, as you're listening to me, as I'm speaking right now, and you're able to put meaning to what I'm saying. Now, I really do appreciate people who end up having English as a learned language later in life, where they have another mother tongue, whether it is from China or Ethiopia or another country in Europe, where it's English is not the first language, and that they choose to learn or have reasons to learn a second language, and that's English. I have incredible respect for people who have more than one language. I have one language, it is English. I have not learned another language. Now, I've got a couple words from French, but very, very limited in that regard. So I have great respect. My one granddaughter, I have one granddaughter and two grandsons. My one granddaughter has been taking school in French immersion. So she speaks English, but of course she's learned French and speaks it incredibly well. I respect people who have that. I don't have that. But language itself is a tool used to communicate meaning. And that's why, like, as I'm speaking, I'm trying to create meaning in sharing with you about language. Language is a system of signs and symbols used by a speech community. In your family, sometimes there's special words that are unique to your family, your work, your church, your small group setting, your government, your where you live, your friends, all those sort of communities that we all have in different ways. Language is the system of signs and symbols that we use to communicate with other people, to share meaning and experience. So when if I were to ask each of you, how are you doing with COVID-19? How stressful? If I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 meaning COVID-19 is really stressful for you. A 1 is that it's very, very limited. And I were to say, I'm going to go through each one of you. Give me a number. And some of you might say a 3. Some of you might say a 6. Some might say a 10. It's a way of giving meaning to your personal experience dealing with a worldwide challenge, a pandemic. And so we use language as a system of signs and symbols with whomever, so that we are giving meaning and experience, and other people are able to understand what we're saying. So when you stand in front of an audience and you're communicating to them, your words mean something. Words are powerful. Words not only share meaning, but they also convey emotion, and they convey attitudes, and they also convey a matter of how we choose to relate to another person, whether it is positively or negatively. Our words mean something, and we need to realize that. And so it's important for you and I to be very careful how we use words. I detest people who use words as a weapon in the sense of trying to hurt somebody. I understand using words to defend yourself, but going out of your way to offensively and intentionally hurt another person. Please listen to me. You probably are very much aware of this. Your words mean something. Your words impact people. And so we need to be very careful how we use these words that we are storing up in our brain, because they can be very, very lasting. I was watching there's a very popular talent show on TV that comes on in January, I guess it is. It's called American Idol. You may have watched it. It's about singing. And there's 3 judges, and they people try out, and they say to some, no, you're not ready yet. Others, yes, you get to go to the next level. And they selected several, and now they're actually meeting in Los Angeles, or did. And for instance, last week we watched the next level. And then, in fact, Sunday and Monday, we watched the next levels taking place. And now next week, we'll watch it as they trim down, and slowly they'll come down to the top 10. And then ultimately, the people in North America, especially the United States, get to vote. And ultimately, somebody is chosen as the American Idol, the number one singer for the year in this contest. I was watching it once, and a gal broke down, and she was sharing, and she was crying a bit, and she was sharing how her mother had said to her, "I wish I never gave birth to you. You are such a waste of time." I sat there stunned. I mean, I was teary-eyed. A human being being so disrespected and so dehumanized. Words mean something, and they last. You might hear 50 people tell you you're a wonderful person, and one person say you're not, and you will not forget that one person who said you're not. We need to be careful with language. And as public speakers, being a public speaker, we need to be cognizant that our words can be hurtful and painful. I have already talked to you about this topic here, and it's the issue of encoding and decoding. Encoding is when we hear sounds that we realize are words. As I'm speaking right now, you hear my voice, and you know each of these sounds I'm saying represents a word. And then all these words come together and it makes a sentence, and several sentences makes a paragraph, and several paragraphs of talking makes a page of talking. I think you understand what I'm saying. As I am speaking, if you are able to understand me, you need to understand where that came from. It started off with you encoding. As a child, it's putting meaning to words or symbols, to these sounds. So you put meaning to it. If I say to you, I bought a new car, and I did not. If I said to you, I bought a new car, you understand that there's 4 words. I bought a new car, 5 words. I, that means me, I'm identifying. Bought means I purchased. New, meaning a brand new car. And so in your mind, you're thinking this person, my professor, just has a brand new car. So each of those words you have in your mind, that sound, it means something. And when you put those 5 words together, you come away with understanding that I must have gone out and purchased a brand new car. You might want to ask a question, what type of car? And then we have a conversation. But the point is that as I speak, in your mind, you already have all those words. And it starts from your youngest years, where in your family setting or whatever setting it was that you grew up, people used words. And over time, your brain put that sound into its mind and said, car. That means an automobile. It's something you drive. It takes you from here to another place. You take it and drive in it. You have a grasp of what that word means, and you have an image of what it might be in your brain. And so as we are growing up and we keep expanding, and then even as we go to school, you go into different disciplines and you start hearing some new words, and you begin to store those words. For instance, the word encoding may be a new word to you, or relatively new word. It really means putting meaning to words in your brain. and it has a meaning and creates an image of a meaning. So if I use the word car, you understand that the car is a sound that's a symbol of a vehicle. And in your mind, you understand the meaning of that, and it creates an image of what a person is saying. That's encoding. It's you storing words in your brain and having it there. Your brain's an incredible computer. So when a person uses a sentence with several words, you have meaning and understanding of what's being said. If somebody says to you romantically, I love you, that has significant relational and emotional meaning to all of us in some way, shape, or form. And those words become important and impact us emotionally, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Now, that's encoding, putting it in our mind. Decoding, as you listen, you interpret the meaning to the words, the symbols that are used by another in order to understand what they are saying. So when I say to you, I love you, you've got all those words in your mind. You've got that. You've encoded it in your mind. Now you decode it to gather meaning to you. When I say to you, 2 weeks today, you're doing the final exam, that tells you we're near the end of the semester. And all those words become important to you. And a couple of you wisely said, can I just ask a clarification question? So that you really are wanting to make sure you have clarity and understanding what I mean. So again, I tell you, you're going to be having your final exam 2 weeks today. I'm going to be sending each of you a link, a YouTube link, and there'll be a 7 or 8 minute speech roughly. You are to watch a speech. You may watch it more than once, and you are to critique it. Okay, you need to understand that I expect you to do a good job. Okay, all those words that I'm using right now, you've got in your brain and you've decoded it. You are now under more and more understanding. Wait a minute, next week we're not meeting because I have to get my third speech in, and then the following week is the final exam. And by the way, I dropped the TED Talk, so that lightens the load a little bit as you're under pressure. So I've done that purposely. Okay, that's what's going on here as we take what we've encoded in our brain, and now we hear somebody speak and we decode for understanding. And it's possible to misunderstand. That happens. And that's why I appreciated 2 or 3 of you as students saying, I just want to make sure I have this understood. And when you did that, I spoke to you, but I was speaking to everybody. Everybody's listening real carefully to make sure they have understanding. That's what's going on when you do public speaking. When you stand in front of an audience and you are sharing, your audience are listening to your words. And that's where, for instance, you need to keep working on being able to speak with clarity with your words so that they're understood. Okay, encoding and decoding. What are we encoding? Words. What are we decoding? Words. When you speak in front of an audience, what do you use to communicate? One of the things you use, words, language. What does your audience do? They're using, and they have words encoded in their brain, and they're pulling those words out, the words you're using, and putting meaning to what you're saying. So again, one-way communication. A sender has a message, and the message is made up of language. Now, the message is made up of nonverbal communication, body language. It's also made up of tone of voice, but it's made up of language, words. And you use a channel. It might be you're doing it live. You might be doing it on a telephone. You might be doing it via email. You might be texting, Instagram, any number of ways, the channel, and there is a person who receives the message. And it's not a message where you're asking for a conversation. It's a message where the receiver is just receiving the message. That very much is public speaking. In public speaking, it is one-way communication to the greater extent. It involves you standing in front of an audience with a message using words and the channel. In this class, and you have to use YouTube recordings and then put it on YouTube for me. This is not the normal way of doing things. Normally, we're in class together, which is so much more what I prefer doing. I wrote to one of my supervisors about yesterday or day before, and I said to her, you know, I'm really missing the classroom, the being with the students. That's where my heart beats, is being actually with the students and sharing. She understood, and she, you know, wrote back and said, really, there isn't likely much more of this going on as more and more vaccines coming out. In fact, I should be getting my vaccine probably I'm going to get my vaccine in the next 2, maybe 3 weeks, which I'll be grateful for. So as it goes down, eventually the world is going to be vaccinated. And I really strongly suggest you do it when your time comes, because it will help. But anyways, I look forward to where I can sit in class with the students and we have this sort of communication taking place. There's transactional, or what we call two-way communication. You remember this? I shared it with you. You have a sender who's over to the left side of the screen here, the word sender, and it's kind of a grayish look, and then it sends over to the grayish receiver. Okay, so the sender says, I've had a wonderful day. I've really enjoyed today. It's been such a good day. And the receiver is listening to all those words and putting meaning and realizing that you really had a wonderful day. And so the receiver might say, well, what made it so wonderful? So now the receiver, the gray, becomes the sender and asks the question, well, what went so wonderful? And the original sender becomes a receiver. What do we got? We got a conversation. So this is what we have taking place when that happens. And so the original sender says, I had a wonderful day. And they're using body language, they're using tone of voice, but they're using words and saying, and the channel is live, or it could be on television, or it could be on Zoom, or it could be an email, text, Instagram. It could be any number of ways of communicating. And the person takes the message, whether they have to read it or whether there's watching you and watching your body language too, and your tone of voice as they're listening to your words. And they send back a message. And the message, like I said, might be, oh, well, what went so well that makes you such a happy person today? And the channel, whatever it is, live or Instagram or Zoom, whatever is the form is used. And you got this circular process going on. It's called a circular communication model, because it's and it can be with more than 2 people, 2 or plus people, as you're sharing. And so you are all very much involved in this process. Now, there are some things common to one-way and two-way communication, and it's the environment. And environments can be warm and supportive. It can also be hostile. It can be neutral in your relationship with the people you're talking to. And I've had both. I've had very hostile audiences that I've had to speak to. And I've had very warm, supportive environments of students as I was sharing, or audiences as I was sharing. And you just need to know that there are different types of environments. And as a public speaker, especially, this is a two-way communication. But you can have environments in one-way communication. It could be warm or hostile, and you have to adjust to that. I've had to speak to audiences that were really angry, hostile. And I've had other audiences that were there for a good time, had other audiences that were supportive. Any number of factors come into play. You also have, as I already shared, encoding, decoding taking place the whole time. You've got these words encoded into your mind. And as I'm speaking, you're taking these words out and you're putting them together and you're putting meaning to what is being said. You also have the issue of noise. Again, I've shared this before. Noise is a reality that takes place. It can be psychological noise. And that, in a real sense, is kind of what I had going on this semester. I had psychological noise taking place because I had something else in my mind while teaching, and it made it really difficult. My wife's health. But there can be physical noise, people actually making noise, making it difficult. So all these factors come to play in communication and helps or deters understanding. So now I want to talk about another important factor when we talk about words, and it's called denotative and connotative meaning. Now, denotative meaning is the explicit meaning of a word. When a word is created, and you may ask, well, where did words come from? Now, in a course that I teach, it's MComm 171, we talk about this very question. And words come into existence over time. There are new words in our vocabulary that weren't there 100 years ago. Or we have given new meaning to words. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But the denotative is the explicit meaning of a word. For instance, if I said to you, oh, I've got a mouse on my desk. Well, what does that mean? Well, 100 years ago, people would have thought I was saying to you this little animal that makes some people go, ugh, to a mouse. That would be its original explicit meaning of a word. But actually, it has taken on new meaning, and that's called the connotative. It's a secondary meaning. And I actually don't have it on the desk. I have it here on, it is on my desk, but it's on my keyboard, right beside my keyboard. And I got my hand on my mouse. In fact, I'm moving that little mouse around, and you can see my pointer as I'm moving the mouse. So a secondary meaning to the word mouse has now become this little computer item tool that we use to operate a computer. And that's also a mouse. So you go from the explicit meaning of a word, mouse, meaning this little rodent, an animal, to a connotative, a secondary meaning that's come out of life development. And it's that little instrument you use on the computer that you move around. And I can do this, like my mouse is making my little pointer work here at this moment here. So in language, when we're talking about speaking to an audience, we need to understand denotative, the explicit meaning of a word, but we need to understand that to some audiences, certain words might have taken on a connotative meaning. Example, years ago, the word in the 1970s in Canada, the word queer, Queer, the meaning of that word in Canada meant embarrassed. Oh, I feel so queer. In other words, I'm so embarrassed. That's what it used to mean. But then when homosexuality really entered, and it's been around all the time, but really entered into a major arena of discussion and practice by some people in the 1970s, people began to call people who are homosexual queer because they were, quote, strange. That's how the word was used and thought then. So understand that the denotative word queer meant embarrassed, then the connotative meaning meant homosexual. So my brother and his wife moved from Canada, from Calgary, Alberta province next to British Columbia, to Southern California. And they began to go to a church and were young adults, relatively speaking. And were part of a young adult work there, and they were having a party. And they decided to play a joke on my sister-in-law. Her nickname is Sam. And they played the joke, and she fell for it. And she was embarrassed. And so she's speaking as a Canadian at that time, and she said, "Oh, I feel so queer." She was saying, "I feel so embarrassed." But the people in Southern California had put this new connotative meaning on it, meaning homosexual. Here's what they heard her say: "I feel so homosexual." The point is, we have to understand language and the meaning of words, and the denotative, the explicit original meaning of a word, and then the connotative, the secondary meaning to its literal meaning. We need to have that understanding. Why? If you're speaking to an audience and you use a word that means something radically different than what its original meaning was, but the audience thinks you said something other than what you really said, they either get confused or they think that you have really said something very different than what you said. And so we need to understand words have meaning, and we have to be doing audience analysis to understand words. Problems that we can have with language, and there really are 4 of them that I want to talk about abstraction, definition, polarization, and allness. So obviously you don't have to worry about remembering this for an exam, but it's important to stop and think about them in giving a speech. Let's talk about abstraction. Abstraction, some general concepts or specific details. And an abstraction is something that is broad and doesn't give you the specific ultra details. Here's a good set of examples: the sky, the air you breathe, trees. Now, the reality is you do not know these things directly. The closest of those are trees. You can say, trees. Yes, I understand what they are because I've seen them. But there are many types of trees, and different types of trees grow really well here in British Columbia, but don't grow as well, 5, 6, 7, 800 miles east of us. And so to say, I went out in the woods so I could just look at all the trees, okay, that's fine. That's general. It's very general concept. But you need to give more specific details. Well, what type of trees? Popular trees, evergreen trees, on and on it goes. Now, the issue of sky and air you breathe is even much more generic and abstract than trees, because at least trees you can see, but you have not ever seen the sky. You can say, I've seen the clouds up in the sky, and I know that the sky we say is blue, but that's really not the seeing sky. That's seeing a whole scientific methodology that explains what happens with your eyes, seeing that color based on any number of factors. And the air you breathe, you don't see your air that you're breathing. Now, you might see in a cold day your breath, but that's not really air. That is the whole issue of warmth and cold meeting together and coming out as breath. So you don't see these things directly. You can touch, hear, smell, or taste them. So you can touch the air. Like right now, I'm waving my hand in front of my face, and I can feel the breeze from that. So I can definitely feel it. The wind, if it blows, I can hear the air moving. If there's a certain type of smell that's in the air right now, I'm looking across the street right now, across the street, the trees are starting to bloom. Now in Vancouver, they bloom faster, but right now there's this beautiful tree across the street, just behind the house across the street. And it's kind of a white pinkish look. It's becoming very pretty to look at. There's a tree just over here further to my right, across the street in front of the house here. And you can see a little bit of reddish. It's getting ready to bloom, okay? So as these trees happen, there's a wonderful smell that comes out of that. So I'll be able to smell that abstraction. Yet we create words to describe these things. What if we said, oh, the air stunk? Well, what am I saying? I'm saying that the air smelled putrid. It wasn't a nice smell, a yicky type smell. And we use that word, putrid, or yicky isn't even a word. And it helps people have a grasp of, it's not a smell you want to smell very often, or it's a smell that's wonderful, such as those trees as they're coming out. And it creates a abstraction. So, when we use language and we're speaking, not every word is concrete. Not every word that we use describes something concrete. It can describe something that's quite abstract, and we need to be able to think of the right words that helps people put meaning to what we're saying. For me to say to you today, it is now spring. The sky, the trees are blooming, and there's a tremendous aroma happening in the air. You're realizing at a certain time of the year that trees are blooming, meaning they're starting to come out with their pretty pre-leaves look, and there's a wonderful, compelling smell that's enjoyable to them. That's very abstract, and that we use language to help explain abstract realities. A second is definition. That represents the boundaries of some named things. So you know what, you and I, we create categories, and we do that to help create understanding. For instance, if I told you I went walking today and I saw an animal, you might say, okay, I got it. He went walking and he saw an animal. But an animal is a broad definition. If I had said I went walking and I saw something, you don't know what the something is until I say an animal. Okay, it's an animal, but what type of animal? And so I narrow it down and I say horse. Wait a minute. You went walking, you saw an animal that was a horse, and in your mind, you're able to create this imagery of it. Now it's become a little tighter definition. But then I could say it was a quarter horse. Now, a quarter horse are often used, it's a different shaped horse. I mean, all horses have the basic same shape, but this horse is uniquely built as a workhorse that is able to run short bursts of speed and is used to make the cows come home, to lead them towards where they have to come home. And in the farm, sometimes they use them. They used to use them as cowboys. Today, less so. But there are all types of horses: quarter horses, thoroughbred horses for racing. There are horses that are for the intent of hard, heavy work. They're big, they're muscular, they pull. And the more we define the horse, the more people have a grasp of understanding. Well, not just the word animal. There are all other sorts of words that we use. For instance, I could say, today I went walking and I saw a car. And you might say, I suspect you saw a lot of cars, and that would be true. But I saw a car I really liked. And now you don't know, though. That's very broad definition. But if I say I saw a 4x4, okay, wait a minute. A 4x4 gives a little more imagery of it. I give the color of it. Okay, I then name the type of car. Let's say a Mazda CX-5. Now you're getting clarity of definition of what type of car or vehicle I'm talking about. So we have to think about language. It can be broad by definition, or it becomes more narrow. The more narrow you get it, the more the person in the mind can create an imagery of what that item is. Problem, we assume others share the same definition. Now that can be a problem. Not everybody knows what a car is. or understands, when I say I saw a horse today, yes, I create an image in my mind, but can easily assume people understand I'm talking about a quarter horse. No, not until you define it more finally can I understand. You're not just talking about a horse, you're talking about a quarter horse, which is very different than just a broad word horse. So that becomes a real challenge there. The next is polarization. And polarization can really be seen in regard to two opposites. It really is thinking of the world in two values of opposites. Okay, here are two opposites, hot and cold. Those are two opposites. If I tell you the water is hot, you're probably not going to stick your hand in if you find out it's boiling hot. You'll burn or scald your hand. If I tell you that the water is cold, you might just put your fingers in to see how cold it is. If I say it's a hot day, you got the imagery of it's a pretty hot day, so you don't wear as many heavy clothes. If it's a cold day, you can put on more clothes. Tonight, I have a meeting. It's outside with a group of people. I'll be watching the weather to determine what sort of clothes I have to wear. But if all I had given to me is either hot or cold, I might overdress, put lots of heavy clothes on because it's cold, or I might put lighter clothes on because it's hot. But what if it's something in between there? See, these two values of opposites are fine, but we have problems with it. There are levels or stages between opposites. For instance, not all issues of life is a matter of extremes. So if you got hot, the other side is cold, you can have something in between. From hot, it might be just warm. From cold, it might just be cool. Or tepid means more kind of in between both hot and cold. Not hot, not cold, not just warm, not just cool, just tepid, somewhere in between. Now that's important. Every day I go for walks. And I think you know, I walk over 6,000 kilometers a year. I've just, and by May 15, midnight May 15, I have to reach 6,000. My target is 6,000 kilometers. I'm now at 5,000, just past 5,200 kilometers. When I go for a walk, I will ask Joanne, what is the weather like now? I can look outside and see if it's raining or sunny, but really, what's it going to be like? And is it going to be hot or cold? And I dress accordingly. Okay, I'm sitting in this room here. It's relatively nice. So I have a short sleeve black shirt on. Yeah, it's black. But if I'm going to go for a walk later and I'm going to go outside, I'm going to put a sweater on or a jacket on or a sweater and a heavier jacket on. Why? It's based on understanding temperature. So the two extremes are helpful, but what we need to do is to understand this issue of polarization of the extremes. Polarization means the opposites. Well, what's somewhere in between there? An example, you are either for or against abortion. Okay, extreme in regard to polarization. I am against abortion. I am for abortion. Is there anything in between at all? We experienced, not us personally, but we were part of a group of young adults several years ago when I was working on my doctoral degree at Oregon State University. And there's about 60, 70 of us that would get together about once a week for some teaching. And then sometimes we'd have a social event. A couple who were members of our group of about the 60 adults, they had a child about 3 years old, and she was pregnant with their second child. And the doctors diagnosed her with cancer and said that this cancer, unless immediately treated, would lead to her death. So they were going to have to do radiation and probably chemotherapy. Here's the problem. Radiation and chemotherapy, they said, would kill the infant, unborn baby who's like a month or two in the womb. And they had to make a decision. Do we say we totally disagree with abortion at all times, so we're going to carry the child and trust everything works out? Or are we going to abort the child by chemotherapy and radiation to save the mother? So that's a tough issue. In their case, they decided they would not take any radiation or chemotherapy. And she took the baby to full term. The baby was born healthy, and she died shortly after. So there's that in between, the opposites, and they made a decision in light of that. It was difficult. The last issue of words is the issue of allness. It's to be all inclusive, and inclusivity, of course, is a big issue socially speaking today. But it's used in a little different way here. Women, the word woman includes every woman living or dead in the world, but not boys or girls or men or nothing else. So it's allness of maturity of females. They are women, which is inclusive of you if you're a woman, and it would be inclusive of my wife, and it would be inclusive of my mother who passed away 8-9 years ago. She was a woman. So there's this issue of allness, and it's there can be problems with allness, and we just need to be aware of that. For instance, we create generalities that at times misrepresents reality. And we have to be careful because generalities means all when all cannot be used. It's easy to say children, I heard this grandmother once said, children are just brats, meaning they're a problem all the time. Is that true? Well, I've had children. They haven't always been brats or problematic. And so that was a misrepresentation of reality. Here's an example of that. Some of you might say, all professors are weird. Well, I suspect there are professors that can be weird because they're human. They're people who can do strange things, or at least we see that. But I was a student for 10 years, 4 years of my Bachelor of Arts degree, 2 years of my Master of Arts degree, and 4 years doing my Doctor of Education degree. And I can tell you, I had some professors that I would say, yeah, I think they were kind of strange. But the vast majority of them were not. Oh, they had their little idiosyncrasies. We all do, little strange things that we do. But not all professors are not weird. That all professors means if you become a professor, you're immediately weird. Well, that's just not true. So we need to be very, very careful. We could say of different people groups, these people are dangerous. No, they're not. Some might be, of course, because every type of people group are going to have dangerous people, but not all are. And that's an inappropriate sort of thing to think of as being that way. So allness can also be a problem. We need to be careful how we use those words. Language shapes attitudes. Language shapes attitudes. Naming people, the names we choose for our children does shape attitudes of other people, but also this is something that bullies do to people. They start naming people a certain way, such as you are ugly, you are stupid, you're unintelligent, you are pathetic, you are weird, and that's naming them. And if it's said enough times, it can very easily become what people believe. For instance, when some people, especially women, but men too, hear the word you are fat, they immediately become self-conscious. If it's said enough, they live with a stigma in their minds that they can't do anything about what they are, and this is what they are, and that therefore means that they're not very worthwhile, which is unfair and inappropriate. So language shapes attitudes. Words shapes attitudes, and we need to be careful of that. In public speaking, we need to be careful what we say to people. Credibility shapes attitudes. If I use certain words in introducing somebody and how I introduce that person, it shapes the attitude of the listener. Do you know that the one title that tends to gain the most respect and shapes attitudes is the word doctor? So if I say to you, I have a guest speaker today, his name is Dr. Green, then it shapes your attitudes. And Dr. Green is a surgeon who does heart surgery. That shapes your attitudes. Credibility is raised by that. And if I say, I have asked a speaker to come in and speak, and he, quite frankly, doesn't have much to say that's of any great value, all that what I just said shapes your attitude. Oh, I guess I don't need to listen. Prof doesn't even think he's worth listening to. So language shapes your attitudes, and we need to be very much aware of that. Salespeople understand the power of words, and that words shape their attitudes. If you're talking about, if you're a salesman of cars, and somebody comes in and says, I really like your make. I like that one over there. Could you tell me about it? And the salesman says, oh, I would never buy those cars. They're pathetic. They're terrible. They break down. You lose all credibility with that car. You're not going to buy it, likely. So we need to be very much aware. Salesmen don't do that. They want to sell. So they're going to try to sell you. If anything, they may try to say too nice of things about something. The status of somebody. As I mentioned, the status of doctor shapes your attitudes. Immediately, I say a father, or I say a mother, or I say a person who's won the Pulitzer recognition in writing, that changes your attitude about something or someone. So language shapes attitudes based on status. And then there's the issue of sexism and racism, and that definitely shapes attitudes. The disrespect that females receive in our world today, as they're seen as somehow superior to men. The reality is that women are not. Women are incredibly capable on many things. Are there things that men might do better than women? Yes, in fact, there is. There's research all over the place. There's research regarding women being superior to men. I have a true false test about the story, facts about from old research about men and women. Here's one that shows where men are superior. Men are superior when it comes to being able to measure distance. For instance, when you're driving a car and you're thinking about passing a car as a two-lane, one going this way, one going this way, it's a highway. A man can tell the distance between a car coming this way and whether they can pass and get around, or whether they should wait to have that car go by first. They actually have better distancing estimation than women. However, let me tell you something that women are superior about. If a man were shipwrecked and by himself on an island and had to survive, and if a woman were on another island, the islands are not near each other, and had to somehow survive during this period of time, waiting and hoping in both cases to be rescued, the woman is superior in survival than men. Yeah, you might say, well, that can't be true. Men are more muscular and they can build a temporary place to, stay in it, to stay out of the elements at night and things like that. Yes, men are physically bigger, and yes, they can carry the work. That's a benefit to them. But here's the difference. Women have greater capacity to survive than men. Part of it's based on chromosome. Men have XO, women have, I think it's XX, if I've got that right. And there's a greater likelihood that they can survive. So guess what? Men have no place to think they're superior. And when it comes to work situation, if a woman has the same capacities, capabilities, education, they should get the same salary that a man might get to do the job. And when they don't, that's sexism. That's inappropriate. Racism shapes attitudes. And that's going on today. And that's been going on all along. And when you're in leadership, what you're saying, what words you use impacts. So if a leader says things that promote racism, as if some people group are less superior to another, it impacts attitudes in agreement or disagreement with the statement. And so that language shapes attitudes. And when you're in public speaking, you need to realize naming, credibility, status, and sexism and racism all interplay and shape the attitudes that exist. Now, I want to talk, this is the last part on this topic here. I've got just a few PowerPoints I can go through fairly quickly. Differences, gender language, and differences in communication between females and males. So here's something said about females. Females are more, spend more time talking about the following. Doesn't mean men don't talk about these. Personal domestic subjects, relationship problems, family, health, and reproductive matters, weight, food, and clothing, men and other women, gossip about close friends. Those are some of the places where words get used significantly, both in the mind and in relationships and in discussions with females. Does it mean males don't do these? No, quite the opposite. But it does mean women tend to be prone to put more time talking about those things and using words of significance in doing that. Males, here's, oh, what happened to my computer? Here we are. I don't know why it's taking so long. Oops, there we are. These are places where men spend more time in regard to talking about music, current events, sports, business, other men, and that interconnects with something else here. Gossip about sports figures and media personalities, and actually, they will gossip about other men in the workplace. In fact, I was reading some research that suggests that men gossip more than women do. And we don't think that way. We think women tend to gossip more, but some research suggests no, that's really not the case at all. And so men and women, not generically, but gender-wise, use words significantly in light of gender reality. Now, there are some places where males and females usually are equal in talking about the certain areas, and these areas are these areas. Personal appearance, both males and females. There's not a lot of difference in regard to they using words to talk about their appearance. The issue of sexuality, yes, may talk about different things related to that, but it is a place that there's a fairly common ground of discussion. And then dating, related to the opposite gender. This is another place where roughly they use about the same number of words in their discussion, and they use the same sorts of words in their discussion. A cross-cultural reality between females and males. Females use language more for connection and intimacy. Doesn't mean men don't. but women use it more for connection and intimacy than males do. Males use language more on words, more for status and independence. And it doesn't mean that women don't, but men use it more than females. From an egotistical perspective, men tend to be very focused in that regard. Traditionally thought as the breadwinners. That's changed radically over the last half century or longer, or at least since the Second World War. And the fact is that men still use it more than women do. Doesn't mean that women don't use it, quite the opposite. Therefore, they, meaning the genders, males and females, females and males, tend to speak a different dialect, or as some say, a very different genderlect regarding their language. Now, that really completes the talk that I have here. And what I want to do is just see if I can, I'm just going to see if I can find, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Just give me a second here. I want to find another section to talk about, and I'm trying to figure out how I can get it up. So if you can just give me a second, I'm going to take a look. I'm going to actually stop my recording for a moment here.